Hello and welcome back to Building on a Budget Models. I'm Thomas, and today we're going to be building the Airfix 1/32 scale Jaguar E Type Series 1. My plan here is to convert it into this Series 3 E Type in celebration of our 10th wedding anniversary. First thing that needs to be done is that the grille at the front needs to be much wider. It was made wider to incorporate the V12 engine. So I looked at some examples of real versions of the car at the British Motor Museum, sanded it wider. There, I'm pretty happy with that. There's then some mould lines which are down the sides of the body and underneath. Don't sand the one on the bonnet, however, as this needs to be a chrome trim. There are some little bonnet clips on the side which don't appear on the Series 3 version as well. And this fuel cap is missing, so I scribed one out using this Tamiya panel line scriber. Had to be very careful not to make any mistakes here. Now it's a good idea to put the rear section on here before painting it. So I did that using some Tamiya extra thin cement. Now the Series 2 and 3 versions of the car had this kind of headlights. This version of the kit doesn't have the concave tube sections underneath, so I got some styrene tube and cut it into the right shape and then glued it in place like so. The rear axle is mainly pre-assembled, but there are 2 springs to go on either side, 4 in total. I then sprayed that matte black and gave it a little bit of a silver weather with this Tamiya weathering powder brush. There are then these black panels that go on either side. Gave that a little bit of a sand to help the cement bond. I'm using Scalextric wire wheels for this. These had to be removed off the axle that they came with. The axle was made out of metal, so I heated that over a candle a little bit, which allowed the plastic to melt slightly and remove the wheels. It's too wide here, so I'll make some adjustments later. The Series 3 had flared wheel arches, so initially I added some Mr. White Putty R to all of them, let that dry and sanded them down, and here it is with 2 coats of grey primer. I printed out my own decal number plates for this, and here's the bodywork after 4 coats of Ford Italian Red from Halfords. Famously, the E-Type used to have its front number plate on the bonnet. I'm first putting down some micro sets to help it move around when I put it into the right position. Now the V12 E-Type also had an extra intake underneath the front grille. I'm using some 1mm plasticard here, which I have bent around the edges. I'm going to glue that onto the sides and then paint it red. The interior here, I've started to paint the floor matte black. It's not quite cured, but I also learned from building my last one that the gear stick is too high up. Also looked at some other interior details such as this armrest and the handbrake, adding a little pile of plasticard to create an armrest at the back, which I'll paint semi-gloss black. These are Revell Aqua paints. I find that they are very forgiving and cure very quickly. Mechanical work here at the front, I painted aluminium. I'd already painted the underside of the body in the same gloss red. Now you can see here that the wheel part goes in like so. However, this won't work with the wheels I'm adding, so I'll change those later. Now here I've added a little bit of aluminium tape around the lower lip of the grille, and then I'm using a very sharp new craft blade to cut that into little slits. Then very carefully fold over those edges to create the chrome lip at the bottom of the grille. Cotton bud here is useful to remove any creases. Now the steering wheel here isn't particularly detailed, it's quite chunky. This is the style I'm basing it on. So I decided to remove the central spokes of it, as I didn't like how it looked. Removed that and sanded it as smooth as possible. Also used this to try to thin out the steering wheel a little bit, as it's a bit on the thick side. And then I've got these Highlight Studio photo etch centres, which are too big because they're for 1/24th scale cars. Here you can see I've painted the steering wheel black. I can use a very sharp craft blade to trim the edges until it's the right size for a 1/32nd scale steering wheel. This was then fixed into place using some super glue gel. I added the centre to that, which I had painted black, and then glued it onto the support which I'd removed from the original steering wheel part. Here it is with the centre, and here it is on the dashboard. I'd added some replacement decals, some of which I found left over from the Jaguar E Type, which fortunately work with this kit. Now these seats I have stolen from an Airfix 1/32nd DB5, and I used some milliput to make some headrests. I used a little chrome stick that I found in the spares box for handbrake. And there we are, pretty happy with that. Once the decals had settled, this was painted in 3 coats of Mr. Super Clear from Mr. Hobby. I protected these grille sections on the bonnet as I planned to wet sand it, and I knew that raised details like that would be susceptible to scratches. I wet sanded it with 2000 grit, trying to remove as many of the imperfections as possible, but also being careful around raised details such as those wheel arches that I expanded on. There it is, mostly flattened down, and then I used some Kent Models Hyper Polish with my Dremel to make it a lot more shiny. Unfortunately, I forgot to record that process. You can see here it's all polished up, and I've also added some matte black and chrome sections. And here I am trimming some aluminium tape into very thin pieces to add the chrome trim which goes along the bonnet. It's a good idea to give the bodywork a bit of a wipe before doing this, as remains of the polish can stop the adhesive on the chrome tape from working properly. The headlights needed to have this kind of chrome upper eyelid, so I cut some semicircles out of the aluminium tape and pushed that into place at the top of the headlights. I then did the same for the other side, and when I was happy with that, I used some Molotow chrome to do the rest of the chrome accents on the headlight surrounds, like so. Pretty happy with that. The door cards were painted in matte black with some chrome accents, and they glue into the inside before adding anything else. Then the dashboard gets glued in like so. I used some super glue gel. Need to make sure that this is as secure as possible, as once you put the floor in, it won't be able to be adjusted. The rear bumper on the Series 3 car was one piece, unlike the Series 1, which was 2 pieces. Now, I needed to find a section to go in the middle of this, so I found some spare parts I had left over from another Airfix kit to make an extra bit of bumper which went into the middle here. Cut that into the right shape, and then found that it would fit in between the 2 other bumper sections like so. I found this spare chrome grille from one of my old mini kits, which could be cut to shape and put inside the Series 3 shape grille. I also added a little gem sticker which I'd coloured yellow with a yellow Sharpie as the Jaguar badge in the middle of the grille. I found some circular headlight lenses which I'd put into place. These are backed with the aluminium tape to also make them reflective. Pretty happy with how I've improved this so far, and I also added some little decal dials to the central console. I used some Tamiya tape to hold it in place whilst the glue secured the sections together. The joins were a little bit more obvious than I wanted them to be. This isn't a great fitting kit, but when it's all on its wheels you can't really see. The front axles I replaced with a little bit of 2mm styrene rod. Need to be trimmed a little bit, but it fit the wheels under the wheel arches no problem. Those were painted silver and then super glued into place. And then the rear ones were trimmed down a little bit to accommodate the new wheels, and they went on nicely as well. The exhaust pipe was painted silver and then weathered with some burnt red. And I wanted to add some more interior details such as visors and rear view mirror, so I made some visors out of styrene card and found some spares for the mirrors in one of the spare boxes. The outside of the window was done in chrome tape, and then that was glued into place using super glue gel. Found these small wing mirrors in an old mini kit. These chrome mirrors are circular, but the ones on the car that I'm using had more kind of flat top and bottom sides, so I used the clippers to flatten those edges and then smoothed them down and added some monochrome to make them chrome on all sides. I drilled small holes in the top of the doors and used a little bit of super glue gel to put them into place. There was also a small bit of chrome trim that needed to go on the top of the doors, which I used aluminium tape. There's the interior with all the added details. Let me know what you think. Now, the roof window isn't exactly right, it should be narrower than this. I didn't want to just paint over the clear because the texture is wrong, so I used a little bit of Tamiya tape like so, pushed it into place and then used a nice new craft knife to cut around those edges. This meant that the texture was a bit more consistent, and then I just went over the top with yet more matte black paint. This had to go on the inside as well, and I also added a chrome trim around the front of the window later. Now I found that the rear bumpers are slightly shorter on the Series 3, so I gave those a slight trim. These had all been coloured in monochrome and left for 3 days to try and cure as best as possible. Monochrome has a great finish but must be left to cure. Finally, the lights on the front and rear are much bigger on the Series 3 car. I painted this silver surround using some aluminium, added the number plate as well on a spare piece of plasticard, and then found some indicators in the spare box which did the job after being coloured with some Tamiya transparent paint. And there it's finished. Very happy with this. I think I have made a big improvement on the original kit, and I also think it looks a lot like the car that we drove to and from our wedding 10 years ago. Please let me know what you think in the comments down below. Hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I'll see you soon.